have the Fortin Killer Cali on the bench today, and this might be the most versatile, vaguely martial voiced module in the whole lineup. This has a lot going on, but as we heard with that intro blast, all the sounds in there are pretty addictive in there. I love the way this module feels. That's kind of one of the most important things with this sort of gain structure, where you can have all the gain you like, but if it's not controllable and if it doesn't feel good under the fingers, you're not going to want to play it. And I just want to play this thing so much. What are we doing here today, though? I've got the Killer Cali loaded into the Sin 20 IR at the moment. I'm using my free cab IR that you can grab from the video description. I'm using a tiny little plate reverb in post. Everything else is just going in direct. So plug and play on there. Two identical channels with two gain controls. The way I like to think about these are that they are going to interact with the switches, the different bright switches on there, to kind of filter and control your sound in different ways. Then there are a bunch of essentially voicing switches on here. So you can bring in a fourth gain stage with that violence switch. There's a saturation switch to get you more of that kind of sticky Jose style distortion that was very popular in the late 80s and early 90s. And then there's this three-way switch, which to me just kind of changes the mid-forwardness of what's going on with the amp. And mid-forwardness is definitely a real word. As we heard in there, in the middle position, it's a lot more scooped and aggressive, and you've kind of got the up position, which pushes the mids forward a bit, and then you've got the bottom position, which really pushes the mids forward, kind of more of a classic plexi style thing on there. So the way I had this set up on the two channels, you can see that on the first channel, I've got the first gain wound up and the second gain in the middle. On the opposite end, I've got the first gain in the middle and the second gain wound up. And what I want to demonstrate is the way these two switches interact with their respective bright switches on there, and the way you can kind of get different textures of gain out of this. You know, if you really want to take this control up first and push that first stage and keep this one backed off, then the second bright cap is going to have a lot more influence on the tone. So what I'll do is I will set them all in the middle on this first channel over here. We'll also hear the structure switch and the effect that that has in the Sin 20 IR. At the moment, I have it. Let's put it in the first position on there. So I guess this is kind of the all-rounder position there. This is a 1990 Les Paul Custom with burst buckers, and we've got these switches off. Let's put both controls in the middle and just have a listen to the effect of these two bright switches across each pot. Should be vaguely similar. Okay, so not wildly different there. However, as soon as I nudge these controls in different directions, we're going to get a different effect. So let's put them back in the neutral position. Now, if I wanted to run the gain on this one really low, that bright switch is going to have a massive effect on the overall tone. So let's wind this control all the way up. We get this. Okay, so you heard with this control really low, there's going to be way more influence when you have these switches on, and that down position is super, super zingy on there. As you bring the amount of gain up on here, these are going to have less of an influence on the tone, but in my opinion, you still need them on if you want that kind of classic tightness out of a modded Marshall style circuit like this. So what you could do is you could play around with running gain 1 really low with the bright in the middle position, and then crank up the second gain control and play around with the positions on there. So I've got it in the middle, we'll go down and then up. that's pretty cool. That to me sounds more like, I guess, a stock JCM 800 kind of sound on there. There's some brightness, there's a bunch of crunch, but it's not super saturated and out of control. If we did the opposite thing, let's run the second gain a bit lower and the first gain a whole bunch higher. What I'll do is I'll turn both of those switches into the middle position again. Now I'm going to play around first with the position of that first bright cap, and then I'll bring the second one in again. And there should be a bit of influence here because I've only got that second knob in the middle. Now, if this all sounds like I am speaking a foreign language, don't worry about it. Just have a look at where the positions are and listen in. So we should get something like this with them both neutral. So to me, that up position is slightly tighter sounding, whereas the down position, especially with both of them on, gives you plenty of gain, but it's just that tiny little bit fatter and rounder, especially where the gain controls are. We haven't touched the EQ on here. We haven't done anything else. We've just played around with the position of these two gain controls and those three-way switches, and you already have a plethora of different tones going on there. All right. Let's hear this. Let's go to the structure switch in the Syn 20 IR just so I can let you hear the impact of that on the overall tone. I really like the middle position, which is kind of more of a, I guess, modern, deep sounding power amp configuration. So let's just go from number 1 to number 2 to hear the difference. Then we'll hear the 3 other switches that are on there. This is really interesting. Difference there with the three-way switch over here to control the mids. The down position, I think, is probably the most classic position on there. The up position is definitely the most mid-forward, and the middle position is really scooped. It's pretty interesting hearing the impact of that reactance control on the Syn 20 IR. That third position, you know, sounds really old school, a lot smoother, and almost like there's more power amp saturation going on or something like that. The up position, I think, is a great all-rounder, but this middle one for the modern tones is what life is all about. So we will live on that one from now on. Just keep in mind that is going to have a big impact on the overall tone. If you were using this with, say, a Syn 5050 or a Fryette power amp, or you were running this in a Syn 2 into the effects return of another head, that is going to have a non-negligible impact on the overall tone. So while we're going through this, what I just had, I felt was like annoyingly bright, like kind of cool if you're in a really loud band with another guitar player. But I took that first bright cap off there. What I want to do now is engage the violence control. So that's an extra gain stage. Now we're going to get really modern, and then we'll bring in that saturation switch on there, which, as you guessed, just adds even more gain. There's so much gain going on here, but I think the point of this whole spiel is that it is very controllable with these two gain controls on here and their respective bright switches, and then these three, I'm going to call them voicing switches on there because they really do change change the voicing of the amp, and the reactance controls. So let's do the fourth gain stage. like that you can still clean this thing up and get some of those old school Marshall style sounds out of it. I love that with that mid voicing switch in the middle, the saturation, the fourth gain stage, the bright caps on, you can get this so saturated yet tight and chunky. It's kind of running the entire history of that sort of sound, which I think is really impressive. And of course, like most of the new Synergy modules, you've got two identically voiced channels in there, so that if you wanted to run one for your old school Michael Schenker style sound on there, where you're not really using the fourth gain stage and the saturation, you want the mids to really pop on there, but still have the flexibility of those two gain controls, you can do that, and you can go into full modern thrash mode on the second channel on there, use the fourth gain stage, use the saturation switch in there, and just go absolutely mental with it. And we're getting all these different textures without really touching the EQ on there. You know, if I was on the second channel and I really wanted to scoop the mids and pump the bass up, I can do that as well with, you know, both bright switches on, fourth gain stage, saturation switch. With all those options on there and all those different voicings, the most important thing is that it actually makes me want to play guitar, and I've had so much fun making this video. Big shout out to Stefan and the whole team at Synergy for getting me this module so that I can make this video. If you want to support what I do directly, there are links to my Patreon and the music that I make with my band Ragdoll. I hope you enjoyed the tones, and I hope that explanation of the way the bright switches and the various voicing options on there interact with one another, as well as what's going on with the Syn 20 IR. If you have any specific questions, just let me know in the comments section below, and I will do my best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Otherwise, go play your guitars and make some filthy, glorious guitar noises. I'll see you on the next one.